ultimately, I think the course that Washington is headed in is incorrect, which is the resurrect the JCPOA approach. But if it is that course that they're going to be continuing on, and if they're going to be continuing to center their Iran policy around the JCPOA, which is a mistake, there are things that I say is the least that you should do. And it actually allows them to pivot away from this, JCPOA all or nothing approach. And the least that you could do is as follows. And it's first commence a diplomatic pressure policy against the Islamic Republic. And step one means this November at the IAEA Board of Governors, a resolution of censure at the Islamic Republic. Step two is working with the European partners, these partners who have over a year ago triggered the dispute resolution mechanism at the Joint Commission, which is a body created by the JCPOA nuclear deal to address implementation and other concerns related to the deal. Check in on the status of that, have a special meeting about Iran's mounting and somewhat irreversible nuclear transgressions, nuclear violations, and nuclear advances. And through the Joint Commission process, commence the process to actually kick back Iran's nuclear file from the IAEA Board of Governors to the UN Security Council. And using the snapback mechanism, which is one of the few good things in the JCPOA, because it has, you could say, a reverse engineered veto mechanism, commence the process to collapse UN Resolution 2231 and bring back the 5 or 6 resolutions that existed that presented a united multilateral basis for pressure against the Islamic Republic and did not have arbitrary timelines of things like prohibitions on Iranian weapons transfers or arbitrary timelines on things like Iranian ballistic missile testing, for instance. Then you could actually improve on that resolution based on Iranian behavior and adjust for new threats, perhaps adding in cruise missiles, perhaps adding in ways to hold Iran accountable into a potentially new resolution, and then working to develop a united economic pressure policy on the back of the collapsed UN Resolution 2231 and the resurrected UN Security Council resolutions. This is a de minimis approach, coupled with, of course, something tougher on the economic side, which is continue the pace of sanctions that existed before. When you look at late fall 2020 and even early 2021, there was a fairly rapid clip of designations coming out of the Treasury Department, holding the regime accountable, human rights abuses, terrorism, missile testing, missile proliferation. And again, using all of those authorities to continue to signal to the regime that its nuclear and non-nuclear threats will be equally taken into account. And then, of course, using the bulk of the sanctions time and the bulk of the sanctions attention and the bulk of the sanctions leverage on punishing, cracking down on the sale, supply, transfer, and even illicit storage of oil, to crack down on those revenues that's helping Iran have the money to say no and to thumb its nose at negotiations. At the same time, you can actually commence talks with your regional partners, talk about what having a regional approach to countering Iran could look like. There is a new task force the Biden administration created, if I'm not mistaken, it's Task Force 59. It's basically drone-centric. Look to get regional countries as part of Task Force 59. Look to build on areas that the Iranians have expressed weakness or concerns about. One major area, of course, is continuing to grow out the Abraham Accords. I think it was just recently that Khamenei, the country's supreme leader, had chastised those countries that had normalized or were normalizing relations with the Israelis, and he was telling them to change course. Something Washington can do is to double down, to add to the impression that the regime is surrounded. And again, as we get close to that second anniversary of the Aban protests, never be afraid to do the right thing, and never be afraid to do the right thing, especially when it is actually in concert with, rather than conflicting with, your moral imperatives and your strategic imperatives, which is to stand up for the Iranian people at every time they take to the streets.